thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, I'll set the stage just a little bit. We have two themes on stage right now. We have agentic finance, and then we have AI transformation. So we'll be going back and forth between those a little bit. Jack, start us off with what is AI transformation? These are, without scaring the people too much. Rob Massey says he scares because he cares, and I think that's the same here. Not that I probably stole his line, but tell us about it.
It's hard to define in one sentence, but I would describe AI transformation as something that's changing literally every single day and every single week, and it's very hard to stay up to date. I think you just need to get involved on prompting, playing around with tools, and looking into more agentic tools, and to figure out what makes the most amount of sense for your company specifically.
So let's get into it a little bit, because you're leading this effort at Plaid. Mm-hmm. You're mostly focused internally, so we're not talking about, this is not a discussion about Plaid's MPC servers and things like that they're posting in agents. This is about how users at Plaid are starting to use AI in their day-to-day operations, their day-to-day lives, right?
Yeah, correct.
So tell us about some of the stuff that you guys are spearheading.
Yeah, we think about AI at Plaid in three huge buckets. One being how we use AI at Plaid. Secondly, how we can embed it into our own products, and then how we can partner and potentially work with AI companies itself with our APIs. I'm owning the internal piece itself. What I'm focusing on that side is how we can use really basic AI tools to automate workflows and also look at agentic solutions itself. Some examples could be on the engineering side, using something like Cloud Code, Cursor, that everyone's heard about, and it's adding so much productivity to our engineering team, building bespoke custom GPTs for our HR, our sales team, and even our finance team, adding in an AI automation workflow as they're looking at employee expenses.
Yeah. Are you, so do you have concrete examples that you can share right now about some cool workflows that you have, that people are automating? Or what's one of your favorite concrete examples of something that's happening right now?
Yeah, I would say on the finance side specifically,
sure.
That team is, like I mentioned, employees are submitting expenses a lot. We have 1,000 employees, not crazy amount, but there's lots of expenses to review. You can only imagine the amount of time it would take for the accounting team to go through and review every single expense. That's not fair for everyone. So we set up an AI automation workflow using multiple vendors to look at every single expense and look at some rules to figure out, is this add a flag or not? And it could proactively flag it to the accounting team. So now they're spending less time. It's just an awesome story of time savings, which is now that team could spend more efforts in other areas.
I love that one too, because it's two things. It's two stories. It's one about saving that team time and effort. There are products that do that, right? Mm-hmm. There are expense products out there. So it's also a story about how this industry is fundamentally changing. If your team can just code something up or build something that actually does that, rather than having to go to a vendor, having to go to someone looking at expense fraud as a vendor.
For sure.
So it's a crazy world that's kind of coming up.
Yeah, the build to buy decision is changing every single week now with companies.
Who's the craziest person at Plaid that's writing code right now? I don't mean crazy. I mean our janitor wrote a full system to automate whatever. But what's the craziest story there?
Yeah, we do a hackathon, week-long hackathon. It's kind of focused on end-to-end project execution. You get to present something out. Someone vibe coded something using Replit, and they built you take a photo of one of the plants in the office. It'll tell you exactly what plant it is, when it should be watered. Someone's like, how do I go buy that? Or maybe we should go look into some sort of agentic commerce way to go purchase that plant and get it shipped to my house.
Oh my God, I love it. Someone taking a passion in the office plants.
Yeah.
All right, Kevin. So we're going to shift a little bit. So we're going from AI transformation to agentic. So Kevin, give me a little bit. So I know you were one of the creators of X402, which is it's a protocol we talked about earlier today for enabling agents to spend money essentially. What was the inspiration, and why did you guys do it, and what are you seeing? What are the cool use cases you're seeing?
Yeah, so we recognized pretty early on that there's a huge market opportunity to enable agents to pay for things, and that this is actually the unblock to autonomy for agents. So when you configure tools for agents, when agents need to call APIs or access third-party data stores and bring that into context to better align with user tasks, there's a big friction point today. In order to do that, you actually need to break the agent flow. You need a human in the loop, and the human needs to go get an API key, navigate a portal, and then configure the tool call specifically via MCP or another framework with the language model. We saw that, and we were like, this breaks agentic autonomy. And is there a way that we can actually kill the API key, this kind of web construct that's existed for a long time? And we realized that stable coins have the potential to kill or replace the API key on a per request basis for APIs. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to enable agents not only to write code, but also to reason about cloud providers and then deploy that code and then maybe deploy a database and then create an app. We wanted to enable agents to make more autonomous, task-driven steps. You can imagine an agent that like pulls social context data from X or from Farcaster, which is the Web3 native version of X, uses that context to then pay for a video creation on Sora 2, mints that video, gets ad revenue off that video, and then actually pays for its own future inference. And so what we ultimately want to enable are agents that have this fully autonomous loop where they can exist independently of human actors and can amass their own wallet holdings and take actions. So that's more on the research side. It's something I'm personally really excited about. I think this is analogous to like one of the first digital life forms. If we can kind of fill this whole economic loop, I think that'd be super cool.
And I love that. I love the idea of having this discussion immediately after the controls discussion. So like, your agent's
talk about that too.
Your agent's like, hey, you know what would be great for this project? Uranium from North Korea. Let me see if I can buy some online.
Right.
That we then. So it's okay. So but I think that leads into this really funny thing that we want to talk about, which is two parts. One is procurement and one is data governance, which is like how are we buying these guys? And Daniela, don't worry, we're gonna loop this back around to like how this fits into the open source and how we enable this. But like, how do you think about managing this? What are the controls that we're gonna start putting? So we're gonna let agents spend money. I think we all believe that. I certainly do. That agents pretty soon are gonna be spending a lot of money. How do you manage it? How do you manage the spend? How do you integrate? How do you work with the vendors? And then how do you actually do data governance? Like what can agents touch? What can they not touch? How do you do sovereignty? So Jack, why don't you start out on the procurement and like maybe control side? Like how are you making sure that this person who made the plant watering app didn't spend like $20,000 per call to like decide that the ficus doesn't need water?
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer is lots of governance, and we want people to move as fast as possible. Plaid's a late-stage company, but we want to act like a startup as much as possible. So you got to try to find that fine line here. From a governance standpoint, we view it from like a data governance. So Plaid has all this data that we work with, that we need to work with in order to make our company productive itself. We worked with lots of inside, outside counsel, security engineering teams to figure out how do we tier this data, like a tier 1 all the way to tier 4? What is safe to use with these tools versus those tools? So everyone has clear expectations, what they can and cannot use.
So that's an internal compliance
That's
process.
an internal
to
compliance
actually like
itself.
really lay out exactly what tools you should or should not be
Exactly.
using.
And then from a procurement lens, I see that completely changing, where now we're looking at it from people don't want to sign multi-year contracts anymore. They want to put something on a credit card because they're like, this product may change 2 weeks from now. We don't want to be on the hook for this anymore. So I think it's really clear that you need to work with your vendors and figure out if they don't have the AI solutions you need to date, is it on their roadmap? If not, you probably need to change your tech stack.
Kevin, you give an agent $10, you let it go wild on Web3. It buys the next ape. It has a $100,000 NFT sitting in its wallet. How do you monitor that? How do you think about it? How do you track it? What are the controls there?
Yeah, there's two answers to that question. The first is OAuth scoping permissions. So OAuth's a standard that's existed on the web for a while now. It's built into MCP in many cases. You can actually scope from a data governance perspective what that instance of the MCP server is able to access. And so scoping and permissions is critical. It's really key. On the spending side, we have policy engines. And so you want to put guardrails on your agents. A lot of this, what we're doing is experimental. It's kind of like lab research and development driven, and it's really important to enable agents if you don't want them to accidentally spend all your money, buying not a Bored Ape but some other thing that doesn't do well. How do you set the policy and spend permissions? And at Coinbase, that's built into our embedded wallet product. We have a policy engine where you can whitelist certain addresses. So you can say you can only trade using these addresses, you can only interact with these APIs, and you can do that on a per API or per address basis. And so that's how, as a user that's configuring one of these agents, how you're able to set the permissions from both the data through OAuth and the spending through the policy engine.
Awesome.
Can I
let's get
actually
into it.
add to that? Because one critical layer is the layer of trust. And if you think about, I love the idea of agents working on my behalf because I'm too busy to go shopping. But if you think about the requirements for trusting, and there's a lot of the work that's happening at the Linux Foundation now that overlaps with blockchain and agentic AI and digital identity is having verifiable credentials, for example, that are privacy preserving. So I might have have my indications of what I want to buy, how much I want to pay, and what I'm looking for, but I don't want that to be exposed to everyone. I can say this piece of data can get exposed to my agent when they are doing this kind of action on my behalf. There's also, obviously, we're here at EDAS, lots of requirements from, a KYC, AML perspective. So how do you build those into a verifiable credential platform and a trust layer? So at the Linux Foundation, we're an open source foundation, and for the last 25 years, basically every piece of technology that you've touched probably sits under our umbrella of projects today. But we are very focused on bringing these technologies and bridging the technologies in the different communities. So I'm responsible for all the blockchain and decentralized identity open source project standards and specifications. We have projects like A2A protocol, which Google brought in to work openly, neutrally into the foundation agency. So we're starting to see more and more projects that are overlapping when it comes to blockchain and crypto and payments and agentic AI and just even data modeling, right, as well. And I think the level of trust and building trust into the base layer is going to be really critical for us to be able to trust these agents, and for the vendors and the consumers to trust the agents on our behalf as well.
Oh yeah, and I know, and part of what you hear is you work with the Canton Foundation, and Canton obviously has a great story around verifiable identities and credentials, and restricted access to those and not. So it's a really exciting time on that side. Something I was going to ask you. I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn here, but I was going to ask you about this. As we talk about this idea that agents can be writing code, or you're going to be using Claude to write code to make your job easier. All of that code is fundamental. The way that all those models were trained was on open source software. Is this a moment? This is like a super out of right wing question. Is this a moment of great vindication or great sadness from the open source community that all this stuff we built that's open source is now actually being used to write a bunch of code, which is awesome, but not all that code is getting turned open source. There's this kind of really interesting moment right now.
There is no doubt that open source has won the battle, especially in the decentralized technology space. There's also a lot of difference between open source that is just open sourced and still in control of one company versus open source that's openly developed and openly governed in a neutral foundation, right? And this is the mission and the charter of the Linux Foundation, is bringing that, making sure that we work with across all technologies and industries to understand that. Because what we're building here, what we're talking about building here, is not a little app that can tell me what the plant is looking like, but essentially it's market infrastructure, right? It is government digital identity infrastructure, things that are going to control, and not in the sense control, but are going to be for us, but for our children and our grandchildren as well. And if you don't apply open source, open governance, and open development principles to building this infrastructure, whether it's AI agents,
bringing the ethos forward.
Exactly. Then we're going to be in a situation where a Web3 company can decide on what to do and how to pivot the network or the agents, et cetera. So I think it's really critical to look at that in the platform. But it doesn't mean that you can just create an ability to not do open source. We encourage everybody to do open source. But when you think about how am I going to get my key competitors? How do you get Google and AWS in the room together to work on these things?
Kevin, you look like you had some thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Mark Andreessen has a great phrase, software is eating the world. I think what we're seeing now is that AI is eating the internet. And so any data, whether that's code or whether that's your personal thoughts that's publicly available via HTTP, is going to be eaten, ingested, and synthesized by language models. And that's already happened. That ship has sailed. And I think in the wake of that, there are a lot of leaders in the tech space. From Google's a great example, Cloudflare, Vercel. We see CEOs talking about, what does this mean for monetization on the internet? How can I actually protect some of my data? And that's the problem that we're trying to solve with X402. We want to enable this native payment required 402 primitive on the internet. So if you have some content that you want agents to be able to access or pull into their context for task completion, they can do micropayments to access that data. We think that the future, unfortunately, will be more paywalls on the internet due to this fact, unless you're purely in an open source world. So
yeah, It's true. I mean, I joked about it earlier, but I wasn't joking. It was funny, not funny. Like, I'm not excited about like everything's gonna have a paywall pretty soon. But
Yeah, and I think agents don't have the same friction as humans, and so that's why we think stablecoins are the right rails for this kind of technology. You can do micropayments without fees. So with the credit card, there's interchange fees and processing fees, and usually don't do credit card transactions under 25 cents. With stablecoins, you can do 1/100 of a cent, and you can access like a coding data set. And then the server can monetize that. And I think agents will be able to reason about what they're purchasing and actually purchase it and do that, a million times a day. And so a great example is like scientific medical data. If we want agents to be able to access this data, we also want to monetize it. And for a human to access these data sets, they need to put a credit card down. They can maybe buy like 5 data sets a day by talking with vendors and like going through the procurement process. If we make it available to agents in a web-native way, agents can just buy and leverage these medical data sets to solve real problems in healthcare. And so I think there's a lot of benefits that will arise from this as well.
so while agents are going to take many parts of your job, they will also create lots of headaches and transactions that we all have to account for here. So keep that in mind, everybody.
For the CPAs.
The CPAs. Jack, okay. I'm going to ask. I want you to get, if you're willing to, I want you to maybe get a little controversial here. I want you to tell me. So, because you're like in the weeds on a day-to-day basis with people working on different problems, and you have HR people working on HR problems, and you have finance people, are people seeing demonstrably different benefits or results from different models or different vendors working for different problem spaces? So like, have you had your finance team trying to work on stuff and they're like, yeah, we used OpenAI and it was garbage, but Claude was great. We worked with like Copilot and it was really good. But like, are you seeing differences in vendors, or like right now, from the AI transformation perspective, folks that are actually thinking about this at home, like, are they all kind of interchangeable and just find the one that's cheapest?
I think engineers can really tell a difference because they're super users. And if you're a non-engineer and you're a super user, kudos to you because you could probably tell a difference. But for the general audience and the crowd, like, I think that it's typically whatever is most easiest. And if you're not getting the most output from it, you're probably not prompting it correctly.
Is that so? So are you guys? So as part of your AI transformation, are you actually going through processes of teaching everybody how to do prompt writing?
Yeah, full certifications on prompt and context engineering itself, how to use specific tools, when to know which tool to use, and vice versa.
Oh, so I mean, we have folks from Deloitte and BDO and huge companies here. So what is like? Give us like what you're thinking are the developing best practices here of like how you actually build like some sort of internal, what would you like a center of excellence or some sort of like knowledge sharing thing for how you actually get all of your, you think about someone like Deloitte or BDO that has like hundreds or thousands of or tens of or hundreds of thousands of like line levels and associates and stuff like that. Like how do you get them all up to skill?
I think we're seeing lots of companies enforce it at a top-down approach, and it's working really, really well. I think that you need to give everyone the content and the context they need to be successful. So teach them how to prompt, invest in the tools and the resources. If you have experts at your company, make them the expert and give people office hours, let vendors come in, let them actually learn. I think more like show, don't tell. Don't just say, here's what this could do. Show them an example, like, hey, the sales team built a entire workflow to build an account plan based off our customers. HR, you could do something similar for writing emails company-wide. Yeah. And you show them an idea of how something can be done. It gets them started to think a little bit more of, oh, that one part of my workflow is taking lots of time. There's got to be a better way to do this right now.
Daniela, let's talk about the intersection, because I know one of the things I want to talk about with you is really the intersection of AI and blockchain, because that's like, we were talking a lot about AI. We talk about agentic payments, so that's one of the intersections here. What are the other intersections? So we talked about verifiable credentials, so that's trust, payments. What else are we seeing out there for where we're actually going to see a bit of a coming together of these two modern trends?
Yeah, I think, and actually, when we were talking about Sibos earlier in the keynote, I actually kicked off. I was the first panel at Sibos this year, talking about blockchain, of course, and permission and permissionless, and the conversions of the blockchain space. For those of us who've been in the industry for a long time, like we kind of like, well, we've been working at it really fast. We've been working at this, and now we're here. So I think micropayments, I agree with Kevin, are really, and stable coins are a killer use case that are really easy for the banking industry, and very importantly, the regulators to understand. Right? And I think the conversions of having killer use cases finally on blockchain and decentralized identity alongside with AI are really going to build applications that actually, move all these things that for the last 10, 12 years we've been working on into production and into the consumer's hands primarily.
Yeah.
Can I add to that?
Get at it. Get at it.
Oh, get at it.
Yeah.
I thought you said no for a second. I was like, okay.
Get at it.
Another area that I think is really interesting at this intersection is context. So we talked a lot about how context is king when it comes to prompting. It's true for agents. For agents to be aligned from a task perspective with their users, they need context. And what this has led to is the creation of memory. And so now with ChatGPT, it is memory over how we've interacted. That's tied to your ChatGPT credential. When you log into the SOAR app, it brings that memory into the SOAR app. But there's a little bit of, I think, sketchiness, or there's, for me, it's worrisome to have our memory of our entire digital identity stored with large providers. And so I think an area that's really interesting is, you may have heard of Zcash, private payments. What about Zcontext? We need zero knowledge stores of memory for users that they can build across their lifetime to basically preserve their privacy, but also bring utility to language models.
Right, and very importantly, data portability, being
That's right.
able to take my memory from application to application and actually own the pieces that
Right.
I want to.
That's exactly right. And all these are developing standards that are also driven through the open source community primarily. So it's a great space to watch.
Let's talk about it really quickly, and maybe Jack jump in here on the governance side. So what can what can go in your agent? What can you ask it? What are your expectations for the employees? Because I know we've already seen situations where people are putting things into ChatGPT they really should not have, and then that's gotten public through different ways and all that kind of stuff. How do you control that at the transformation level, the business level?
Yeah, from a procurement lens, when you're signing a contract with an OpenAI or an Anthropic, you want to get a zero data retention policy. That means that whatever data you put into it, their models cannot learn from it, because every model is generative. If your employees are taking data and throwing it into Perplexity or another tool you don't have a corporate contract with, their models are learning from your data. Someone can have prompt injection. There's so many security concerns there that you want to avoid. So that's very, very important when you're thinking about that.
So when you guys are thinking about rolling this out, are you doing basically zero memory, zero knowledge on that side, but then rolling out MCP servers with memory for customers, for your internal clients?
Yeah, correct. So the tools you are allowed to use, have these policies put in place. Here's the type of data you can use with it. If you want to use extra sensitive data, there's a whole different a process for that.
Oh, are you letting anyone use extra sensitive data with AIs or
No.
not? Okay.
No.
There's a different process. It's no. It's not a great process, but it is a no.
Yeah, it's a no most of the time.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, Danielle. So let's bring it back here a little bit. Let's talk about companies. So there's people here that might not be super familiar with open source, and that's becoming kind of you mentioned that open source won, and I tend to agree here that this is it's kind of one. What can folks, how do you explain that ethos to the people in the audience here? So maybe the guys from Deloitte and the big companies out there that don't think a lot about open source, that might not have done a lot of open source contributions or different things.
Yeah.
Make a quick pitch for it.
Yeah, it's not just about contributions and participation. It's about being able to make decisions when you are purchasing software, when you are developing systems with partners, that open source is critical and core to what you have. There's this big myth about people believe that you can't make money off of open source, and that is a very, very big myth. So number one is many companies make a lot of money off of open source, and that's important to the ecosystem growth as well. Another myth is that there's these individual developers around the world that just show up and work on your enterprise, on your code projects, and that's not the case. So if you have engineers, even if they're not engineers specifically, blockchain engineers or decentralized identity engineers, but you're using the tools to implement projects and services into it. Let your engineers become part of that community.
And I'll stop you briefly to just say, I didn't realize this when we started this panel, but I realize it now. When we're talking about engineers, in the AI world, we're actually not talking about engineers anymore. It's not just engineers. So it's one of those things that actually engage. You at all of your companies, you are going to have a lot of people writing code that had not been writing code before. And open source is one of those things that you need to start thinking about right now because they might check it into GitHub. They might check it in, they might like release it publicly. It's not just engineers. It's everybody now.
There's, just like there's controls.
Accountants.
It's accountants, it's HR people.
But just like there's controls in an open source community into how code gets contributed and how that, and who contributes that code as well. So people are always scared about, security and who's, contributed to this code project. But, open source is very enterprise, and if it's run as an enterprise grade project, it's very secure, and it's really, it's a way for what I always call the plumbing, the non-interesting stuff to be worked on collaboratively, so then the rest of the applications and the businesses on top can move much, much faster.
I love it. This next year, this session is going to be called Agentic Vibe Coding for Accountants, and everyone's going to get their laptop out, and then we're all going to check it into GitHub afterwards. Kevin, we're closing in on time here. Give us some last thoughts.
Yeah, if you can dream it, you can build it now, and that's true with AI. And so, context is king. If you have a problem that you want to solve, like maybe you want a Slack automation, that pulls like accounting data into your Slack and reports on it for the community. I'd say it's really important to be proactive, and you can leverage these tools to help build prototypes. And then my closing thought is that demos win arguments, and so I'm on the BD side, but like I used to pull out a PowerPoint, and I think people like generally would fall asleep. Now I pull out a demo and I do code, and I can actually like make demos around the software that we're building really quickly, customize the front end, all just with a couple words, and that's really amazing from a technology standpoint.
Jack, maybe a last thought here, and maybe offer some advice to CFOs and people in the audience here who want to bring in agentic finance and processes.
Yeah, talk to all of your vendors, and if they don't already have AI on the roadmap, look into their competitors and see what you can do there. And pro tip, if you are struggling getting the most amount of value or output from AI tool, ask AI how to use AI. A lot of people don't do that, and it knows exactly how to help you and teach you. You could say, hey, I'm an accountant, build me a 2-week crash course on how to use this tool. It'll teach you better than anyone else can on YouTube.
That's amazing. Daniela, bring us home.
I think trust is fundamental in everything that we're talking about today here. And I think that, open source really brings that trust and transparency to not just the code, but the privacy requirements that we'll need as individuals, as agents, and as companies to interact in this new world.
Amazing. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.